Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar session on the MA English program for 2022. I am Benrilo Kikon. I work with the Office of Admissions at Ashoka University. This session will comprise of two parts, a faculty masterclass and an information session on the MA English program. The faculty masterclass will be conducted by Dr. Johannes Burgers, who is an assistant professor of English and Digital Humanities at Ashoka University. He earned his Ph.D. from City University of New York. Professor Burgers' research interests include qualitative data visualization, narrative GIS, global modernism, transnational modernism, racial theories, sexology, aesthetics, William Faulkner, and Jewish studies. At the end of the talk, we will have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions about the masterclass or the MA English program in general, kindly use the Q&A box. Okay, now so I hand over the time to Dr. Burgers.
Hello, I cannot see you, but I'm assuming you're there. So I'm going to take you through just a little bit of intro to our MA program in English, and then I'll roll right into this masterclass, and then we'll dovetail into questions about either the MA or the masterclass. Yeah, hopefully we can answer all of your questions. So just a little bit about the MA. We're certainly not the only MA program in India, and certainly not the only MA program in the world, right? There's plenty of options to choose from. But part of what we're trying to do with the English MA program is to carve out a space in India in which we allow students to explore English not from a strictly disciplinary point of view, but more broadly conceived as literature. So you're walking across time periods, across genres, but also across different spaces in which literature or text is studied. And that MA grounding is going to help students move on to the next level, which is the Ph.D. In many respects, we're trying to create something unique in India while we're composed our MA program. So as I said, even though it says MA in English, it's really just an MA in literature. I believe it was just some administrative rule that we couldn't call it comparative literature and English. It's just literatures in general is really what we do, but on paper it says MA in English. We focus on critical and creative thinking. We focus on in-depth research, and we focus on having students roam outside the very strict disciplinary boundaries of English to incorporate other ways of viewing the world that will capacitate and accelerate their thinking through literature. Even though we obviously encourage a larger engagement with the world around us, this is a program very much situated in the South Asian context, and many of our faculty teach on South Asia. It's a 2-year MA, 4-semester program. Students can pursue a concentration and specialize in a particular field. If they do so, they can work on a thesis in this field as well. Students can also opt not to do a concentration and explore different disciplines. Our main concentrations and our faculty strength is in gender and sexuality studies, South Asian literatures, modern literature and culture, global medieval literature, global and Indian Shakespeare's, and we have a very strong creative writing program with some very eminent creative writers in our faculty. So I've been saying that we wanted to carve out a space that was relatively unique in Indian higher ed. So what makes our courses unique and maybe sets them apart? We see the classroom as a dialogic space for young scholars to develop their voice. We're not really interested in catering a bunch of information to students, which they then learn and then recite back to us in essay form. That's not very interesting. We want to create a space where students find their own voice. And classes do tend to be somewhat smaller, so you don't have to economize what you say in class because there's plenty of time and space for you to really let your ideas develop. We focus on students who want to create new knowledge rather than simply reproducing what's already been said. Any MA program can offer a list of books to read, but it's much different when you're getting personal mentorship that's trying to help you take your ideas to the next level and to make them original and your own. Part of that originality is that classes cut across time, space, and discipline. Our courses, rather than being focused on a period or focused on a particular author, are focused on a question. For example, I'm teaching a course in called fuzzy cartographies next semester, and that's focused on a very basic question: where is here? And how do we start to answer that question of our placeness in the world through literature and also through some computational techniques, as I'll talk about in just a second. You will get personal mentorship from some of the top scholars in the field. I say that with some embarrassment because I'm not one of those top scholars. So truth in advertising, you're not getting the A team with me, but I do have some interesting things to say, I hope. And one thing that I will warn you for is that our MA is very intense, especially the first semester in which we do lit theory. There's a lot of students who halfway through the semester want to give up hope, but we push them through, and at the end of it, they feel much better for having done it. This is some of the hardest training you'll do throughout your academic career, but all of it is to prepare you for either a bright future in another career path or to continue on to do a Ph.D. either in India or abroad. So I talked a lot about unique classes. And rather than simply, saying that they're unique, I would just assume demonstrate it. So I'm going to do so by talking a little bit about the type of research that I do. I work in a field called Digital Humanities. And the format right now is a little bit unnatural to an Ashoka classroom. I cannot see you, and apparently I cannot answer or ask any questions of you either that you can then answer. So it's very much a one-way street right now. Suffice to say that this is not the most natural context for me to give this presentation. I also cannot see your faces, and my dog thinks I'm hilarious, so I'm assuming you're all laughing at all my stupid dad jokes as I go through this presentation. So one of the things that I'm interested in, and it seems silly, is minor characters and the world of the text. So one of the things to consider is when you're reading literature, that minor characters or small characters have a really tough go of it. Major characters like Hamlet and his ilk get all the attention. In fact, if a character in a play is prominent enough, they'll remake that play over and over again, or that piece of literature over and over again. So here we have the Kenneth Branagh version of Hamlet, a Mel Gibson version, a Benedict Cumberbatch version of Hamlet. Even Sarah Bernard did a version of Hamlet. If you don't know who that is, she was the undisputed femme fatale of the 1910s and 20s. And beyond, depicting Hamlet on stage, we also have film versions. Here's Ethan Hawke in Hamlet in this version is a film school student who goes to UC New York. There is also, of course, a Disney version with Donald Duck. In case you were worried, you can have the Donald Duck version. There is this Swedish graphic novel version of Hamlet. And of course, a little bit closer to home is Vishal Bajroi's Haider, right, set in Kashmir, but also, again, about Hamlet. Even secondary characters in Hamlet have gotten their own spin-off. So Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, the two sort of friends / henchmen, try to take down Hamlet in that play, get their own spin-off in Tom Stoppart's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. But no one cares about, oh, I was going to say there's also this Ophelia. No one seems to care about Bernardo and Francisco. Now, if you don't know who they are, Bernardo and Francisco are the two guards, or the two sentinels, that open up the play of Hamlet. They, start talking about the state of Denmark. Now, I have to confess that I did not know their names were Bernardo and Francisco when I was preparing this presentation. I thought they were just guards. And the truly embarrassing thing is that I've actually taught Hamlet before multiple times. But you just read past these initial characters because obviously Hamlet, Ophelia, Claudius, Gertrude, they're the main people in this play and they're the ones you focus on. So minor characters get ignored. And we might say, well, they get ignored because they're not all that relevant and we shouldn't care about them. But there's interesting things going on with the way in which authors and creators in general use minor characters, right? It's perhaps not as much thought as it goes into who constitutes the background of the play or constitutes the background of a piece of literature. And that can have some very interesting results. For example, we sometimes see these controversies about how background characters represent the social world of the text. So in the show Friends, one of the controversies was that in the first couple of seasons of that show, and I've never actually watched like a full episode of Friends because I don't find it particularly amusing. But I know from Ashoka students that a lot of Ashoka students watch it, so that's why I pulled up this example. But the first seasons of Friends, one of the issues with that show was that even though they're living in New York, there's not a single person of color who actually appears in the background of that show. And New York is an incredibly diverse place, so you really have to go out of your way to only represent whiteness, right? So, this is one of those things that people brought up, that how can you set a show in New York and have it be so white? The same counts for a movie like 300 by Zack Snyder. This is a movie in which, based on the graphic novel and based on historical events, somewhat embellished historical events in which the Spartans tried to hold back the Persian Empire. And the Spartans, who are Greek, are represented as white and heroic and noble, and the Persian Empire is seen as evil and lascivious and all these negative things, right? And all the background characters in that movie are very unflattering of Persian culture. So again, controversy there. So you'll note that many of the articles I showed you were hot takes in either blogs or newspaper articles, and that type of level of investigation works fine for a newspaper article. But how do you actually prove that the background characters in a particular movie or in a particular play skew and represent a very limited bandwidth of society? How would you go about doing this? Is Friends really that much whiter than a show like Seinfeld, which was on around at the same time? Is it that much whiter than, I don't know, Will and Grace? I'm trying to name all my 90s movie shows here. How often were non-white people represented on TV in general, and how, right? Are the broadly drawn characters in 300 any different than the large-scale battles in other similar movies with large pitch battles? Could a similar criticism be made against Lord of the Rings? I know that I think the orcs are in Lord of the Rings, that they clearly don't represent a delineated culture, but still, to what extent does it have sort of a visual impact in what we consider as normal looking people, right? So how do you go about proving this? You would need to know roughly how many, for each show, which type of background characters there are and what their racial composition is. And then you can say, look, look, other shows in the 90s, they had this same problem, so it's not unique to Friends. Or you might say, actually, other shows in the 90s that were set in New York had a far more diverse cast of characters. For example, a show like Law and Order regularly had people of color on. And so Friends would be the exception then. But how do you prove it? Well, there's actually a physical limit to how many movies and shows you can watch for research. And some of you may have found this out during the quarantines that we've all been in, that at a certain point, you kind of run out of Netflix to watch, right? Much less document everyone who's in the background. So this is where the discipline I work in, digital humanities, can make a useful intervention. Essentially, I use computational techniques to answer literary questions that would be very hard to answer using traditional research methods. We use the power of computers to supplement, complement, or replace conventional humanities research methods. And digital humanities is quite a number of different practices. You have computational narratology, literary cartography and GIS, 3D modeling, digital pedagogy, corpus linguistics, and digital archiving, just to name a few. And I'll put all my cards on the table and say, you know, I'm an expert in some of these, but something like 3D modeling or corpus linguistics, even though I teach it, I'm certainly not an expert in. These are all relatively different fields. And there's many things that don't actually have a name for them yet. What I do, literary demography, it says it in the title, so it must be a thing, but it's just something I invented because we don't really have a name for the type of stuff that I'm doing yet. So how would we go about using these computational techniques? How would we go about measuring background characters in movies? This is what a scholar named Anil Ramakrishna has done. Essentially what he did is he took the movie scripts of, I think, 6,000 movies. Obviously, that's a number of movies that would be very hard to read on your own. He ran them through some computational software and figured out, you know, which character is saying what. And then he cross-matched the characters in those movie scripts with IMDb and linked it to the demographic info of that particular actor, right? So if Matt Damon has a particular, you know, movie that he's in, then the movie would be cross-matched with IMDb, and it would say, like, Matt Damon spoke this amount of lines in this movie. Also, it says on his IMDb profile that he's a white man. So they did this, and then they looked at the distribution of male, female actors, and then also divvied that up by race. I realized that if you're on a smaller screen, this is very hard to see. But what they've mapped out here with these histograms is the x-axis here is age. So as you go right, people get older. And as you go up, that's the number of characters. You'll notice that for Caucasian or white, then the number of characters per movie who is white, you know, that goes up to 500-600. The scale for East Asian goes up to 5. The scale for mixed ancestry goes up to 40. And then Pacific Islander women are not even represented in any of these movies. And if you know anything about histograms, you know they tend to follow a normal distribution. That appears to be the case for men, right? Where you have younger men and older men. But if you look at the women, there's just a cutoff that women in movies generally tend to skew younger, that as soon as women turn older, they can't be in movies, they don't appear in movies. This research shows the cumulative impact of what it's like to watch all these movies. You're consuming all of this media, and by and large, what you're seeing is not even the main characters, but the people in the background, the sort of the side characters, are mostly white, mostly male. The men tend to, you know, differentiate in age range, but the women all tend to be kind of younger, right? That's a version of reality that's been created before us. You know, that's not always, you know, obviously there's movies with older women characters, and there's movies with, you know, characters who are not white. But by and large, in the aggregate, the media you're consuming that's coming out of Hollywood skews in this way, right? You kind of have to wonder what effects that might have on people if this is the reality that's being portrayed today as. So Novels and short stories, of course, use many different types of characters as well. And no doubt there are representations of from different walks of life. And that's one of the reasons why we read literature. Yet minor characters are rarely studied. And there's a very practical reason for that. Characters in fiction are really hard to find. Novels and short stories are what is called unstructured data. So chapters, page numbers, and punctuation provide some structure to the data, but actually extracting entities from that is a complicated task. You can think with a movie script, you have the script and you just have the character name. So you can just pull the character name out and cross-match that with the IMDb database. I'm making it seem simpler than it actually is. It's still pretty complex. But on the whole, the data is there for you to extract all that. In fiction, you run into the problem that even if you have a character name, that character is not going to be identified by that character name over and over again. It's going to be a pronoun or another type of indirect reference to that character. So we have the technology to extract character names and sometimes even character pronouns, so we can reconcile the pronouns with the character names. But it's hard to get any other information. For example, you'd be hard pressed to get racial information on a character in a story. And there's no character database out there like IMDb that's going to tell you each minor character in each novel that's out there, because why would anyone do that? So the only way to go about that is through database entry. All of this character information has to be entered manually into a database. And this is very time consuming. And one would say that only an idiot would spend their time entering demographic information on fictional characters. Because after all, there's really no money to be made in that, right? But why would you do that? But you're in luck, because I'm that idiot. This is what I do, is I spend all this time entering this data into the database. But when you do that, once you've created that data, there's actually some very powerful insights that you get about literature through this methodology. So I work on a man called William Faulkner, who wrote about a place called Yoknapatawpha. Now, some of you may not be familiar with Faulkner. He was a Mississippi-born writer who rose from relative obscurity to become one of the most prominent writers of the American 20th century. In fact, there's more written about Faulkner in the 20th century than any other American author. He received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1949, and like I said, he's one of the most written about and taught 20th century American authors. Most of his work is about Yoknapatawpha County in Jefferson. These are fictional versions of the actual Lafayette County in Oxford in his native Mississippi. I've indicated here on Google Maps where this is. So he's writing about the Deep South in the years before the Civil Rights Movement. Using this postage stamp of native soil, he traces the decline of the aristocratic planter class and the ascendancy of the redneck as the South shifts from an agrarian to an industrial society. In doing so, he also renders a highly sensitive portrait of those caught in between these two social forces: African Americans, women, Northerners, and other interlopers. His fiction is highly experimental and shows effortless between the personal, local, regional, and universal. So, long story short, I work for the Digital Yoknapatawpha project, and because all of these fictions are interconnected, because these 14 novels and 54 short stories all talk about the same time and place, it makes sense to try to get a demography of that place. So what we've done, and it's not just me entering data, it's been 30 scholars over a period of 10 years who have entered all of the locations, characters, and events in the majority of the work of one author. And not just, like I said, every minor character. So if there's like an unnamed baker somewhere or an unnamed person on the road, we entered that person as well. And when we then took those locations and those characters and those events, and we decided to map them. So Faulkner created maps of his own fiction, and in fact, the map is more of the starting point than the characters were. indicating where certain events took place in his saga. And it's not just for one story, he's identifying multiple stories here. We created a digital version of that map, and then we mapped the characters and the events and locations on that. So you do that, you get an interface like this. I know the interface doesn't look that jazzy. It will be updated eventually. It's just when you do this type of work, you work on the data first and you worry about the bells and whistles a little bit later. So this is the map of Yoknapatawpha as seen through the story for the novel, The Sound and the Fury. You can map onto there all of the characters. Then you can map all of the events which are shown in these heat maps. And mind you that just one of these points is like 50 different data points that we have to enter. And in total, what you're looking at here is about 12,000 data points, all of which I hand curated during the summer of 2014. So my life's work is right in front of me. Because you have this data linked to the map and everything around it, you can drill into the data. So we can click any character and get a profile of that character, not just in that particular novel, but across the entire corpus. The same counts for locations, events. You can pull up manuscript pages from the small library at the University of Virginia that will show you, the actual text that Faulkner was working on. You can also listen to audio recordings of him answer questions about his novels, which is fantastic because oftentimes if you go to these literary panels, the authors get really in depth about everything they were thinking about when they wrote the novel, and Faulkner notoriously would write books and then just not read them again. So he would get all these questions and he would just not know how to answer. So it's kind of hilarious that he's very poorly read about his own works sometimes. Then you can make visualizations like this. So this is a visualization that shows the relations of characters to places, or a heat map visualization that shows you where the most events are taking place in this particular novel. And the work I do in literary demography uses GIS. So essentially, I take all of the maps, which is roughly, I think it's 68 maps, and rather than looking at them by story, I look at them as an entire corpus. So I flip them over, I stack them on top of each other, and I make one giant map. And when you do that, you can spatialize where all the events and all the characters are taking place. Each of these things is a point, obviously, and it represents roughly 30,000 points in the corpus. What you're looking at here, and each of those points, again, has about 50 data points attached to it. So we can then split that off into demographic data. So for example, for character demography, we have the gender, the race, the class, the rank that they play, and whether they're an individual or group. And because there's events attached to that demographic data, we can actually play that in across the narrative. So what I've done here is a visualization of characters by race, so African American, Anglo American, mixed ancestry, and Native American. And then I've taken the entire corpus, and rather than looking at it novel by novel, we've ordered it by date. And I've said, okay, let's play what it looks like when people of different races move into the county. How is Faulkner doing that? So if you look at the bottom right here, you'll see the year counter, and here obviously is the legend. And what you're going to see is essentially the migration into Yoknapatawpha that Faulkner is describing, that starts in the northeast of the map. First, these major plantation sites will get populated, the Native American population will get displaced, and then you'll see first the town of Jefferson will start to blossom, and then this little hamlet called Frenchman Bend will start to appear. So here we go. There's no sound effects as of yet. It's just a still map. So now we're getting into the Civil War. We suddenly see one of the plantations blow up. with a lot of activity there. You see the center of town starting to emerge, and then at the turn of the century, we see the expansion of the town outwards to this hamlet. And Faulkner is very particular about who he places where in his narrative. If we look at the character frequency distribution, you'll note that the overwhelming majority of characters who appear are white men, right? African-American men appear, after Anglo-American women appear next most frequently, but all of the other demographics are ignored in this narrative. Right, so white men constitute 63% of the people who Faulkner writes about, and all others are 37% combined. We can even split that up into domestic space and public space. And we can show that in domestic spaces, the racial distribution is actually a little bit more equal, right? Because there's many of the aristocratic families have either people they've enslaved, if it's a pre-Civil War story, or servants post-Civil War who are also in those domestic spaces. And so there's more diversity in that representation, although that's not inherently a good thing, right? Because it's showing people who are non-white in a servile position or subaltern position. But then in public space, again, it's, white people occurring with white people. Rarely does it happen in public space that a white person of one gender will be with a person who is not white of another gender, right? And so we can see the way in which Faulkner really patrolled these racial and gendered lines in pre-civil rights South. Here's a spatialization of it. There's a lot of data here to look at, but suffice to say, you see sort of a similar pattern here. Where white men can co-occur with Black men in public space. But as you might imagine, white women rarely co-occur with African-American men in public space, right? Just because of the segregation boundaries in the South at the time. So, none of this is, in many respects, this work is not groundbreaking in the sense that, yes, Faulkner was a white man writing about white men, which does tend to happen. People tend to reflect the social world they see, not necessarily the social world that is out there. At the same time, I think it's a good example of how public space and domestic space mediate what types of characters are seen. And we may think of that when we watch shows and movies as well, like what type of people are out in public and what type of people did we see in the house and how are those different roles represented. And then, public and domestic space, if we were to study that map a little bit more carefully, we can think about that in relation to the town or the plantation. At the end of the day, what's interesting is that this author's representation does not really track with the historical reality. In fact, the racial distribution was probably a little bit closer, right? So even though Faulkner is writing extensively about racial issues, it's fundamentally from a white perspective. And these are some of the things that you can demonstrate once you have all that data when you're doing the digital humanities. Okay, I've spoken enough and more than I had planned to, but I hope that was sort of a good insight into the type of interdisciplinary work being done at Ashoka, and I look forward to answering some of your questions.
Thank you, Professor Burgers, for giving us a peek into what a class at Ashoka, an MA English class at Ashoka would look like. Thank you very much for that. Before we go on to the Q&A, I would like to give a few information about some general things about the MA English program. The application form has already been launched. You can find the application form on our website. if you go on to www.ashoka.edu.in, you will see a tab called Apply. You can click on the Apply tab and it will take you to the application form portal. The process that we follow is that after a student fills in the application form, they will be shortlisted based on how well they have filled up the application form. Shortlisted applicants will then be invited to the next stage, which is the on-the-spot essay writing, which we generally hold online. And then the shortlisted candidates from the on-the-spot essay writing will then be invited to the interview round. They will be interviewed by a panel of interviewers consisting of faculty members from the English department. So some of the important dates that you will need to note are the 1st of December 2021, where we've launched the application forms. The submission deadline is the 4th of March. There's not much time really, so I would like to encourage you to submit your application form on time. The on-the-spot essay writing will be held on the 10th of April. And then interviews will begin by the 25th of April onwards. And then finally, you will be notified of your decision by the 17th of May. Now, with regard to the fees, this is the fee structure for first year and second year. For first year, the tuition fees will be 5,02,000. For residence cost, MA students have the option of whether they choose to get the residence offered by Ashoka University. There is a section on your application form on whether you would like to opt in or opt out of residence. If you opt in for residence, there are two options. The first one is the standard option, which will cost you 90,000, which is an off-campus residence arranged by Ashoka University. Option 2 is an exceptional option, which is an on-campus residence. And this will be decided on a case-by-case basis by the admissions committee, and it will cost you 1,70,000. So this is the general fee structure. And what Ashoka is known for is the generous amount of financial aid that we offer to our students. The financial aid is not based on merit, but on the basis of need of each student. And these are the financial aid brackets that we generally offer to our students. We have a waiver of 25% on tuition, and the amount waived would be 1,25,500. We then have a waiver of 50% on tuition, 75% on tuition, 100% waiver on tuition. For some students, there is also a waiver of 100% on tuition and 50% on residence, 100% on tuition and residence, and some might even get 100% waiver on tuition, residence, and meals. If you would like more information about the financial aid, please log on to our website and go to the financial aid page. We have the financial aid form on the website. So if you would like to apply for financial aid, I would highly recommend you to get a download of the form, because we do a thorough check on each candidate, and there are a lot of documents that would be required of you. So if you are planning to apply for aid, I would advise you to sort of get your papers ready and just make sure that you're aware of what is expected from you. Of course, you can apply for financial aid only if you have received an offer of admission. So this will happen only after an offer has been made to you. The financial aid for MA English students, as you will be aware, the MA English program at Ashoka is a fairly new program. We started in 2020, and the first batch of students, we had 23 students. Out of the 23, 16 students are on aid. So we have a total of 70% students on aid. For the batch of 2021 to 23, we have a total number of 15 students, out of which 10 of them are on aid, and so 67% of students are on aid. So as you can see, we have 68% of our MA English students on aid, varying on the type of aid that they are getting. Right. Now, so we will move on to the Q&A section. I can see a few questions here. We will start with this question for Professor. There's a question by an attendee here who's asking how much math or data structures is required to develop this data models.
Yeah, how much is much? I don't know. Certainly some, some of the visualizations require some knowledge of math, but the critical part that's going on in digital humanities, or at least the work I'm doing, is close reading. So it's fundamentally still a literary skill to be able to read a text and to figure out how a particular character is demographically embedded. And that also, nods to I think the Tanchu's question about how do you actually produce this demographic data. So, but if you take a DH course with me, yes, you'll be required to learn math and to code.
Okay, and related to that question, we have another question that asks how to produce demographic data and maps for fictional places and locations, which are based on the whims of the author. Yeah,
this was the Tanchu's question I was answering as well. Yeah, you have to infer it from the text. It's not a 100% foolproof process, obviously, but it requires a lot of close reading.
All right. There are a couple of questions on whether you can do the MA in English if you haven't done an undergrad in English. And yes, we have a lot of applicants, and we have quite a few students who have not majored in English in their undergrad, but are doing their MA in English program at Ashoka. It does not matter what discipline or what discipline you are from. It could be the sciences, it could be the humanities, but as long as you prove yourself that you have the rigor to do the MA English program, then that is all that the MA English Admissions Committee is looking for. Professor, would you like to add anything more to it?
No, I would just amplify it and say that absolutely, we encourage folks who are not English trained to apply, because we're looking for intellectual curiosity and dexterity, and not necessarily whether you know that Frankenstein was written in 1816. That's something you can learn in the program, but we're more interested in curious interdisciplinary thinkers.
Right. Someone is asking if they can do the MA English program while pursuing a 9-to-5 job. Unfortunately, no, we cannot. The course is so intensive that it will not give you space or time to do anything else apart from your program. So yeah, that's a clear no. All right. A question for Dr. Burgers. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey towards specializing in digital humanities?
It was somewhat of an accidental journey. I actually started my undergrad as a computer science major, and then I started doing literature. And then as I was doing literature, I kept using computers, and then I realized there's actually something called digital humanities that I'd been doing all along. And so that's how I kind of rolled into it. It's a fairly new field.
Okay. All right. Someone's asking where they can get the recording from. The recording of this session will be available on Ashoka University's website, YouTube channel. So you will get the recording on the YouTube channel. A few questions like, what is the Cgpa required for becoming eligible to apply to the MA English program? GPA required would be 3 or equivalent. Also, 55% or above would be required for you to apply. All right. Next question is, how does the MA English program at Ashoka University suit for someone who seeks to become a writer, to explore gender, literature, tradition, and customs, but academically from a science background? Would you like to take that?
Again, we have students from science backgrounds, and they can be some of our strongest students. So if you have a science background, apply. Just because you have a science background doesn't mean you can't write.
Right. Is there any course with concentration on the post-colonial literature or post-colonial theory, especially emphasizing on Salman Rushdie, Naipaul, Anita Desai, and other Indian authors who have written about their post-colonial experience?
We have an entire concentration on South Asian literatures, so you'll be running across those authors, no doubt, in those courses. I can't imagine a specific course on those three authors, but we have such a wealth of South Asian scholarship, not just in our department, but also at Ashoka, that you would be certainly be exposed to post-colonial thought in that regard as well.
Okay, there's one question specifically for you again. How does one ensure that racial or gender-based biases don't creep into these models?
Well, you don't, right? And that's the point. I mean, I think part of one of the things you'll learn in the MA at Ashoka is that subjectivity feeds into all of the work that you do, and you have to account for that and be transparent about where this work is coming from.
Okay. All right. There's someone asking about if you can complete the course online. So for the past 2 years during the pandemic, most of the sessions have been online, but we are looking forward to opening up the campus and having the students on campus. So when that option becomes available, students will be required to be on campus. So we do not have an online course for the MA program as such. Someone's asking about the PhD in English 2022 applications. Any idea when that is opening?
I should know, but I don't. I feel like it's coming up.
I think it should open this month in January.
Yeah.
So if you keep an eye out on the website, there is a section for PhD English. If you just keep an eye out on that section, you will be given the proper information at the right time. So, but it's probably January. So, okay. I have a few follow-up questions. My first question right now is: I'm in my final year of graduation, and I have the 4th semester mark sheet. Can I combine in a single PDF and upload it? Yes, you can do that. If you're pursuing your undergrad right now and do not have your final semester mark sheet, that's okay. You can still apply as long as you submit the previous semester's mark sheet. I've presented a research paper and I've received a certificate. Where can I upload? There's a section called upload any other document. So you can upload your document there. How important is the statement of purpose and the essays for shortlisting the candidate other than the academic score? I think Professor would be the right person to answer this.
They're the most important thing. I mean, we look at the score just sort of as a bar to clear, but if you have a really high score, that's going to make little difference if you don't have a great personal statement and a good essay. So those are the important things.
Okay, someone's asking if the MA English program at Ashoka helps in navigating non-academic fields. For instance, publishing industry, journalism, creative writing.
So definitely creative writing and publishing. And in fact, we have a number of authors who have good connections with publishers, and we have a very strong department in translation as well. So if those are things that you're interested in, then definitely the creative writing concentration would be right up your alley.
Okay. All right, this is something about the application form. Due to COVID, some of you are not able to obtain your academic transcripts. Yes, we are accepting scanned copies of your mark sheets. That will be totally fine. What are some career prospects after this program? Would you like to take this?
Yeah, so it's a research MA. So I mean, definitely part of this is that we're training folks to go do a PhD either in India or abroad. But again, I think the creative writing component and some of the media components will help channel you into those fields as well. So publishing, translation, media. I work with new media. Students I've had have ended up getting jobs in that type of field.
Right. There are some questions again about how MA would help them improve themselves as writers. And I think we have already covered this. The creative writing course would be helpful for you if you want to pursue your career as a writer. So yeah, the creative writing concentration would be helpful. Again, a few questions on the selection process of the candidates. So like I said earlier, the first step is your application form. The faculty from the admissions committee English department will be going through each one of your application forms, reading your statement of purpose and your essay. And based on how you write and engage with the questions and the prompts, you will be selected for the next round, which is the on-the-spot essay writing. The on-the-spot essay writing, as is implied, is something that you would have to do on the spot. You'll be given a few questions to choose from, and you'd be required to write an essay. Questions will revolve around English literature because that's what we're looking for. And finally, if you get through the on-the-spot essay writing, then you will get to be interviewed by a panel of English faculty who will talk to you, get to know you better as a person, see how you would fit into the academic rigor at Ashoka University, and yeah, just get to know you as a person and learn about your academic interests and whether you are a good fit for an MA English program at Ashoka University. Would you like to add anything more to that, Professor?
Yeah, and mind you that the interview process, it's not just whether you can meet the, we think you can handle the workload, but it's more about what we can also do for you. So let's say you're really interested in Argentinian literature. We have no one who works in that. So we wouldn't be very inclined to take you on. That would be kind of unfair to offer you a position if we can't actually teach you in the field that you're interested in. So we're really also looking out for what's going to be a good fit for you if we actually make sense as a program for you.
And is there something unique that you're looking that you look for in the personal statement?
I don't know how to answer that because it's a personal statement. So presumably they're all unique, right? I would say, really focus on telling us your story and why this is something that you want to do, why this is something you want to pursue. Getting an MA in English is not the most self-evident choice. So tell us why you want to do that.
Right. Also, as long as you're honest in your personal statement, I think that's what that matters. So, right. How important is research experience in the application process?
We expect students to have some level of familiarity and rigor with research because that first semester you'll be doing research papers right off the bat, but it's not automatically disqualifying if you haven't written say an undergraduate thesis, but it is a research master. So if you don't enjoy research, then this would not necessarily be the best fit.
All right, and what kind of support is offered to students who wish to pursue international PhD courses after the MA?
So we do very intense personal advising of our students. We try to make sure that everyone has a place to go after Ashoka. And this is not to brag, but we do very well in placing our students abroad.
All right. Is English literature easy to study?
I don't know how to answer that. I mean, it's, do what you love and you never work a day in your life. So I guess it is easy in that sense.
Yeah. If you are interested in it, then it should be easy for you, but it wouldn't be, how do you say it? you would be expected to do a lot of reading, a lot of writing, a lot of research. So if that is what you are looking forward to, I think the MA English program would be a good fit for you.
Yeah, I'll be frank and say, we do expect our students to work 50 to 60 hours a week. This is not a cakewalk. You're gonna have to say goodbye to your weekends and some of your friends for a while because you're gonna be doing nothing but work. But by the end of it, you'll be a very, very well-trained scholar.
Yeah, right. Could you elaborate on the modern literature and culture concentration, please?
Just give me a moment to
Sure.
refresh. Yeah, this is a slate of courses that's more focused on contemporary literature. And they range in topics from trauma and disasters, cinema and violence, loss and longing, and the rhetoric of social protest.
Okay. Also, if you would like more information about the concentrations, you can go on to our website and you will find more details there. So, okay, I haven't read books in a long time, but I love studying it and research. Should I be discouraged from applying?
Obviously, no, I wouldn't ever discourage anyone from applying, but I would say that if you were gonna apply, I would read a couple of books. Yeah, because that's one of the things that might come up in an interview. So what have you read recently and why? So to kind of freshen up a little bit would be a good first step.
Right. There's some questions about placements after MA English. So as I mentioned earlier, we started this program in 2020 and our first batch of students will be graduating in 2022. So as of now, we do not have any data on placements after MA English at Ashoka, but we do have a career development office at Ashoka University that helps students in getting placed in different companies and think tanks and research centers. Also, the PhD placements is something that Ashoka is also known for. So if you are concerned about placements, the Career Development Office is always there to help you. But again, the onus would be on you as a student to sort of tell us about your interests, where you would like to go, and support will obviously be given to you by Ashoka. Do students get any amount of work experience under their respective professors? Is that option available to students?
Absolutely. Yeah, we take on research assistants all the time to help us with projects. So, part of what the investment in the program is to have a personal mentorship with a professor. So.
Okay, and is there a place for contemporary Indian fiction and the politics of publishing practices surrounding it in your department?
Absolutely. I mean, we have contemporary Indian authors in our department, so yeah, you'll be well served in that department.
Okay, just a couple of questions left, and we are also running out of time. So if you have some final questions, please use the time now. In the meanwhile, we will be taking these questions. Someone's asking, are there theses to study in English literature? I'm not very sure about this question. Are you asking if you will be studying, you will be writing thesis, or whether you will be studying thesis already written by students? But I think we can take both sides of the question.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think the question might be if there are models of theses, and those certainly exist. Yeah, I'm not sure what that question means. Maybe move on to the next one, and Armin can try to rephrase a little bit.
Yeah, if you can rephrase the question and make it clearer, that'd be good. Someone has done his undergrad through distance mode of learning in humanities. Are they eligible for the course? Yes, you are eligible for the course if you have a 55% or and above, or a GPA of 3%. Is there mental health support for students through the entirety of the program?
We do have mental health support on campus. Yeah, it's separate from the program.
It's separate from the program. We have the Ashoka Center for Wellbeing. Students are free to avail the resources available from the center. We do offer support for mental health, and yeah, so students need not worry about that when they're in the program. Do undergrad students get RA positions? Is it desired during MA applications?
It's not something that I would necessarily look for. It's great if someone has done a research assistantship, but those opportunities aren't always available to everyone. So it's not a demerit if you haven't done a research assistantship.
Okay, one last question. Do you think you'll be open in the upcoming academic session? We're tired of online classes.
Vrinda, me and you both are very tired of online classes. It's very hard to not be able to communicate with students. So, and in fact, one of the selling points of being at Ashoka is that you're on campus, and that most of the classwork happens outside of class, right? When everyone's just kind of chatting in the mess or at the Dava. So, yes.
Yeah. See, it all depends on how the situation is. We were hoping to open up campus by January this year, and then Omicron happened and we had to shut down everything. So we cannot plan for the future in any certainty. We just have to see how things go, and yeah. But we really do want to open up the campus and have the students on campus. So yeah, that's that. I think we are done with the questions. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Burgers. I think it was a really enjoyable session, and I'm sure the attendees would agree with me too if they could speak, but unfortunately they can't use their audio. So yeah. Oh, sorry, I'll just take one last question. Is there a fee waiver in case of online classes? Your residence costs will not be included in your fee structure if the classes are held online. So that's the fee waiver. Tuition costs will remain the same. Right, so thank you to all the attendees for being present for this session and for all the questions that came in. We look forward to reading your applications and hopefully seeing you during the interviews and finally on campus. Thank you so much and have a good day, everyone.